Alright, so as promised, my third video today, which is the funny video. At least I think it is. I mean, in a really messed up way. I wouldn't even call it Schadenfreude. It's just, yeah. Anyway, this Trump activist vowed to fight sexually deviant secularism. He was caught with child porn. Now, I'm sure that a lot of people would say, well, yeah. I mean, usually the biggest haters are the ones who are doing the thing that they accuse others of. But it's still entertaining to read. It will never stop being entertaining because of the blatant hypocrisy. Anyway, so let's get to the article. The former leader of an evangelical Get Out the Vote group supporting Donald Trump's successful re-election bid was charged on Monday with 8 counts of possessing child pornography. Of course it's an evangelical. Of course it is. Like I said, the ones who beat their chest about religion the most are usually the ones who are doing the very thing that they accuse others of doing. And in this case, well, I'll get to it. Prosecutors allege Jason Yates, former CEO of My Faith Votes, possessed a hard drive populated with sexual abuse images of minors under 14 years of age. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension began investigating the 55-year-old at the end of July, Religion News reports. Okay, so we're not even talking, late teens where, there's a possibility that, they looked older and they didn't bother to open their pie holes and tell us that they were actually underage. No. These are practically preteens. I mean, under 14. We are talking almost prepubescent. Actually, it is prepubescent to possibly into puberty. What the hell? I mean, I guess technically that does make him a man of God because the Bible doesn't say anything about not marrying children. Nothing says, oh yeah, you have to wait till 18 to get married. That's not in there. I mean, it doesn't advocate, but it doesn't specify what constitutes an adult. My Faith Votes, which counts former Republican Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee as an honorary chair, is one of a group of nonprofits founded to win support among the evangelical community for the former and future president. Now, I'm not going to say this doesn't say anything about Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee says everything for himself. He's done it when he ran for president. And so, yeah, this doesn't color him in any way because he might not have known. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. It doesn't say anything either way. But yeah, it's not a good look. Just weeks before the hard drive was discovered, Yates penned an op-ed for MAGA mouthpiece The Washington Times, urging devout Christians to fight sexually deviant messages aimed at children, in particular those identified as sympathetic to the LGBTQ+ community. Which I've mentioned many times on this channel, that the only people sexualizing children are straight people. I'm not talking about shit like this. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like I've mentioned many times before, babies, infants, especially boys, having ladies' man, or little girls having, something that says, that they're looking for a heroic man, or something that sexualizes both of them, and they are children. And yet it's the LGBTQ plus community that's being considered groomers. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, moving on. This infernal programming is being downloaded into our children, and it becomes far easier when it finds no resistance in our public square, when it is allowed to fill the void left by the absence of our faith, he wrote. Okay, now 2 things. Number 1, just because you're LGBTQ plus doesn't mean you're an atheist. There are plenty of members of the community who are also religious. You can question why they are, but they are. Secondly, let's pretend that they are all atheists. So what? I mean, how does that change anything? I realize that it's a well-worn stereotype that atheists are just atheists because they want to sin and sin and sin. But what religious people need to understand is when you accuse us of being sinners and that we don't believe in God because we just want to sin, or we're mad at God, or whatever you think is the reason people are atheists, which is usually wrong. When you claim that especially if you word it in such a way like, oh, if I were an atheist, I would, do XYZ, whatever, horrible thing you're talking about, like murder. It's usually murder or rape. And that just says more about the person saying that than it does atheists. I still remember what Penn Jillette said once when somebody said, well, since you're an atheist, why don't you murder as much as you want? And he's like, I do murder as much as I want. It's just that what I want is 0. Just this idea that the only way to be good is if you believe in a God. And that, like I said, that says more about the person saying it. Because they're basically saying, oh, if I didn't think that I would get into trouble, I would totally rape and murder. We aren't not raping and murdering because we think we can get away with it, which, spoiler alert, the human law is a thing. So that might prevent some people, but for the most part, atheists don't do that. Not because they're afraid of getting into trouble. It's because they have a freaking conscience. They know it's wrong. They know it's ick. So they don't do it. It has absolutely nothing to do with your God. But I guess religious people have to assume that, because if they learn that morality does not come from a God, that you can choose to be moral and not have anything to do with it, then people would probably not be religious necessarily. Now, for the people who actually think that the only way to prevent them from doing horrible things is to believe in a God, then by all means keep believing in one. I would much rather someone believe in God and use that as a reason not to do horrible things than to free themselves of the belief and then end up doing really freaking horrible things. But as you can see, that doesn't prevent people from doing horrible things. Actually, we've gotten rid of slavery a long time ago. There is the curse of Ham that is in the Bible. And even Jesus said that slaves should obey their masters, which a lot of people would say, no, we shouldn't have slavery. So people question the morality in the Bible. Now, as far as LGBT plus people, there might be some people who think, and it's been a tradition, that homosexuality is mentioned in the Bible, which literally none of the other letters is mentioned. When they think of the LGBT plus community, they literally only think of homosexuality. So only the L and the G. Now, first off, the passage that's usually used to defend that bigotry, if you look at the original script, not the multiple translations since then, it refers to pedophilia and not homosexuality. And actually, the way I read that passage, is to not be a dick to strangers. Because if you read it, to prevent their daughters from being raped, they offered up these people who just traveled to their inn. They're just visiting, they're just passing through. Actually, I think they were angels. But they were given to this mob to be raped. And yeah, no mention of homosexuality there. But that's usually what people consider the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, which it's not. It doesn't even mention homosexuality. Now, there is that one passage about don't lie with a man the way you would lie with a woman. Again, that is actually a passage against pedophilia, not homosexuality. All right. Now that we've covered that, the group's website blames Christians for failing to stand up against secular progressives, which they fault for a litany of social ills. Okay, now, one more thing about the secular thing. I used to subscribe to The Humanist, and there were plenty of religious humanists. The point of being a secular humanist is not whether you're religious or not. The point is whether you recognize that just because you're religious doesn't mean that you're somehow better than someone else. Like, okay, great, you're Christian. Wonderful. Your religion isn't any better or worse than a Muslim or a Sikh or a Hindu. You cannot put yourself above others simply because of that. And it's why it's secular is it's basically saying the best way is to keep religion off to the side. Don't put it into public like the government. Keep religion out simply because not everybody is religious. So why pander to those who are? base your laws based on one person's faith? And let's face it, there are many denominations of Christianity. So we're not even saying, based on the Christian religion, because which one? There's plenty. So basically, it's just saying that, fine, you want to be religious? Great. You feel like X, Y, and Z is bad? Fine. Don't do X, Y, and Z. But to force others to think like you and follow your supposed morality, no. No, that's why it's secular. Not because none of these people are religious. It's that they don't shove it down anybody else's throat. As a result of apathy at the voting booth and in public life, we've suffered devastating moral decay, declining religious freedom, immoral national debt, and the erosion of traditional family values, the group's website reads. Which, considering Trump was just reelected president, that sentence to me is absolutely hilarious. Now, let's parse this. Now, apathy at the voting booth, well, people, except for this past election, at least in Marathon County, we had our highest turnout in I don't know how long. It was around 95%. But yeah, there are a lot of people who are apathetic when it comes to the election. Yes. In public life, yes, there are a lot of people who, after the pandemic, have seemed to have forgotten how to act in public. So maybe that's what they mean. I don't know. We've suffered devastating moral decay. See, that's the problem. Whose morals? Because what you consider immoral, others might not. And as long as your morals don't interfere with other people, you really should just live your own life and let others live their own lives. Declining religious freedom. What the hell does that mean? Declining religious freedom. Nobody is forcing a Christian to be anything but a Christian. Nobody is forcing any religious person to change their religion. Actually, it's been traditionally Christians who've done that. So, what declining religious freedom? That is code for Christians are not allowed to step over other people. They're not allowed to step all over other people, and that is what the declining religious freedom is. This idea that they no longer are allowed to feel superior to others. Immoral national debt. Traditionally, Republicans balloon the national debt much more than Democrats, so there's that. And again, how is that immoral? I mean, you might question how big it is, but immoral? Don't know about that. And the erosion of traditional family values, the group's website reads. Okay, traditional family values, it always is hilarious to me because whose tradition? If you read the Bible, there are plenty of polygamous relationships. So, seriously, what tradition are we talking about? It wasn't until, I think it was the 12th century, where people actually had traditional marriage rights. You might have heard in period pieces or older movies where they talk about sex as in marrying someone or taking a spouse, taking a wife. Because that was, until I think the 12th century, that is literally how things worked. All you had to do was have sex and you were married. You basically said you were married, you're married. There was no religious rites, there was no marriage certificate. I mean, that was something that they realized, oh, I guess we should, clear this up, or people are going to be marrying a million people because they're off bed hopping. So there was some rules set down for marriage. But before then, no, that was, so exactly what traditions are we talking about? All right. My Faith Votes began its political I really have a trouble with that word, proselytizing in 2016 with Trump's first bid for the presidency, spending millions on get-out-the-vote efforts aimed at Christians. The source of the group's funding is unclear. Because, nothing bad ever comes from that sentence. Ben Carson, Trump's future Housing and Urban Development Secretary and a client of the group's founder, influential Christian literary agent Celie Yates, served as My Faith Votes' first honorary chair. As part of their proselytizing efforts, Jason Yates promoted a vote pledge to be signed by targeted evangelicals. It amazes me, not that Christians vote for Trump because he is supposedly going to push their agenda. That I understand. That they don't care about who he is as a person. But that there are people who actually think he's religious. And I'm not saying that just because he's an atheist, which he obviously is. But I'm an atheist. I could fake being a Christian much better than he could fake it. I mean, like, basic things like being able to pick out a Bible verse. Or being able to... And unfortunately, I'm not good at remembering. I'm pretty good at remembering words, but not necessarily the passage and verse. The chapter and verse. So, but, I would have to probably look it up before doing an interview. But at least I would have some idea. And, of course, the thing that people made so much fun of him in his first run for the office, 2 Corinthians. I mean, seriously. I didn't realize that you had to be particularly smart to know it was 2 Corinthians, but anyway. As a Christian, I commit to voting for candidates and policies that uphold the sanctity of life, the traditional family, religious liberty, and justice for all, the pledge reads. Okay. Before I continue, uphold the sanctity of life. Okay, does anybody truly freaking believe that this man, Donald Trump, has never paid for an abortion? I'm going to go out on a limb and say, yes, he has most definitely paid for abortions. Since the man cannot keep it in his pants, he definitely has done that. The traditional family, you are supporting someone who's been married 3 times. Now, technically, if you want to go by the Bible, then I guess, yeah, kind of, sort of. Only, generally, the wives weren't alive when he moved on. Because, like I said, polygamy, otherwise. Religious liberty. Seriously, who is against religious liberty? Unless by religious liberty you mean Christians can shit on everybody else, which I'm assuming is what religious liberty means. And justice for all. That is rich coming from people who want to be free to discriminate against whomever they want. How is that justice for all exactly? Moving on. I believe that my biblical values should guide my choices at the ballot box, ensuring that our nation's laws and leaders reflect God's truth and righteousness. Which, again, is hilarious to me considering Donald Trump is a literal convicted felon. And now Jack Smith has to hurry up and wrap up his cases because the DOJ has a policy against criminal proceedings against a sitting president. So they have to quickly wrap things up. So, yeah. I mean, I get it that he is pushing, or at least claims to be pushing, policies that you agree with. But, really? Considering that he doesn't follow any of that? You know, God's truth and righteousness, that is a joke. Really a joke. Yates's Tribulations was discovered by a relative who accidentally came across the hard drive in his office in July. That witness shared it with another relative who reported it to authorities. Why the first witness didn't do that, I have no clue. I mean, seriously, was it just a matter of, oh my God, look what's on this hard drive, isn't this cool? And the other relative was like, no, not cool. I mean, seriously, why? According to court documents, the drive contains over 100 still images and videos featuring the sexual abuse of minors under 14. One more thing about the voting for God's righteousness or whatever. I understand that you want to live a moral life. Like, don't do this, don't do that, whatever. But, again, when it comes to morals, you really can't dictate it to other people. So, you might vote your conscience, but at the same time, you're also voting to force other people to agree with you. So, it's one thing to have your moral compass. It's another thing to force others to agree with your moral compass. Again, as long as you don't harm anyone, and that's another reason why voting your morals is questionable, because you have people like this. Oh, I want a president who will do this, that, and the other thing. The ironic thing is Project 2025 wants to ban pornography. Not just child pornography, all pornography. So the joke's on him. Yates declined to provide a password for the drive, but did admit he had a prior conviction related to the possession of child pornography, which had been expunged. The complaint filed against him reads. So, that's great. Now, I hope this means that he hasn't actually harmed actual children, but the fact that he's watching child porn is just all sorts of ick. Because obviously they had to be harmed to create the porn. In the introduction to a GOTV video series produced by My Faith Votes, Yates asserts, "It's time Christians let their faith guide their politics. aligning their views with God's Word, and boldly confronting today's cultural challenges. Again, I sympathize with you wanting to, vote for someone who agrees with your morals. I understand that. But the problem becomes when your morals don't align with other people's. You cannot force other people to agree with your morals. If you think it's immoral to be LGBTQ, fine. Don't be that. I mean, obviously, it's not as simple as that because it's not a choice. But if you don't want to act on that, fine. Don't act on it. Be miserable. Nobody is forcing you to be happy. But to insist that these people should not exist because you don't think they should? No, that's not how living in a society works. You are free to think whatever horrible thoughts you want. You don't get to dictate to other people what they should think. It's critical, he says, that we reject apathy. Why does he keep thinking everybody is apathetic about issues simply because they don't agree with him? I don't think he knows what apathy means. I really don't. When he did the apathy with the vote in the voting booth, it's possible. But, I mean, the majority of the country voted for Donald Trump, so I have to agree with him there. There's probably a lot of apathy. But I think he basically means that people are supporting policy positions that he thinks are immoral, so they mustn't possibly actually care about these issues, that they're just randomly picking people, that they don't actually support it or something. So we reject apathy and think biblically about the issues in front of us. And this series is the ideal resource to help Christians navigate every political issue through the lens of the Word. Which I've already mentioned that what people think is the Word isn't necessarily the Word. So there is that. Anyway, I believe that is all I have for this video. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.